Oh, here we go. Hey, everybody, Autism Fitness founder, leading the movement for movement, Eric Chessen here. I am yet again excited. I never stop being excited for these, but yet again excited. I have the wondrous Colleen Cherry-Liguria with me, Autism Fitness Certified Pro Extraordinaire, adapted PE specialist. I don't even like the term adapted. All PE should be adapted if we're actually focusing on the
Right?
specific student or individual. Like scalability is the key. But you don't need me to say that because we have Colleen to fill in all of these blanks. So quick,
Absolutely.
quick synopsis. Colleen, you you had an a phenomenal challenge in taking over for one of my previous guests, the
Yes.
now Dr. Chrissy Blanchard Alworth.
Yes.
And you stepped in. I was excited when we first met virtually because Chrissy said, "Hey, we call it retiring in quotes because she went and got her doctorate and now she's going to be
Yes.
teaching. So semi-retirement, but just a bridge to what she's going to do next. But she said, don't worry, the program is still going to be intact in the school because Colleen is taking over. So
Aw.
I was thrilled because so much of what I'd like to talk about, and we can take it, to any direction, but not only scalability, but sustainability too. Like, how do we keep moving and thriving and providing access to students and individuals on the spectrum with respect to physical fitness? So, if you would
Yeah.
please grace our audience as they like and subscribe this also. I'm always great. I'm so clutch in getting that in 4 minutes in to the
Yeah, you have to.
conversation. So your adapted PE journey, where does it start?
Where does it start?
Yeah, where do you start out and say, I want to do this?
Okay, I'll tell you, it's quite a journey, actually. My undergraduate degree, I went to Elon University right near you in Burlington, North Carolina, or Elon, North Carolina. Um, and I majored in music, theater, and dance. So I always, from age 3, was with you on the movement for movement. I've been moving since I was 3 and I have not stopped. So I started with dance and was going to go into a performing arts degree with singing, acting, and dance. My senior year, I decided that I was very moved by seeing a child watching one of our shows, moving to the music with one of our shows. And I was like, wow, this child, he had some pretty intense physical disabilities, but he was still moving with the rhythm and he was happy while he was doing it. And I was like, huh, that's something. I was moved to tears when I saw this child connecting with us through movement. And I just knew that I had to do something with that, but I didn't know what. So I began to do graduate studies in dance movement therapy. So taking movement and also pairing that with psychotherapy, which I greatly enjoyed. However, at that time, I began working at the Center for Autism as a paraprofessional because I just knew that I wanted to work with kids with autism. I had just discovered a lot about the population and it just clicked with me. And I knew that that's the population of individuals that I wanted to serve.
Mhm.
So I was working as a paraprofessional and I met Miss Chrissy at the time. And of course, at a school, it's a separate public day school, so it's small classes. And as a paraprofessional, I was very involved in, hands-on instruction with the kids in PE because 6 kids, most of them needed one-on-one support. So we were kind of divided up, 4 of us to take turns helping each kiddo.
Oh, wow.
And
So
I just
you had a 4-6 ratio.
At that time, yes, because there was 3 of us in our classroom, and then with Chrissy, that was 4 of us and
Okay.
6 kiddos.
Mhm.
So that was the ratio, and I greatly enjoyed it. And at that point, I talked to Chrissy about it, and I said, I really want to do this, but how do I do adapted PE? Like it was a new field to me. I didn't even know it existed, honestly, at that time. And so, that's when Chrissy became my mentor, and we talked through it, and we actually co-taught and co-treated as I was going through grad school. That was such an absolute gift. She let me come in and do Irish dance units with the kids and just fun things with the kids, or a Zumba unit with the kids because of my love for dance and dance background. And with your fitness background, I know that, when you love something and you're sharing your passion with the athletes, with your students, they feel that energy and they jump right in.
I
So,
think that is the single biggest thing. Like the reason someone had commented to me a couple weeks ago, I was doing an interview and they said, "Oh, you're still so excited about it like 20 years later." I'm like, "Because I love
yeah,
this is what I love to do." 2 hours
yeah,
ago, I was in my garage gym training, and that's the thing. And I think you raised such a salient point because when you love doing it and then you can provide that coaching and that mentoring to somebody else who then gets it and it clicks for them,
yep,
like that's I know it's the essence of empathetic coaching where you're like, I
yes.
know what it feels like to be right there to do that thing at that moment.
Yes, and you know the moment where it clicked for you. And when you see that moment where something clicks for one of your athletes,
Yeah.
it's just, I mean, the look of pride on their face, and I take a picture and we make a video and we share it with mom, and it's amazing. So it's just, that look in a child's eye of just getting it,
Hmm.
and movement being something that affects their body, mind, soul, the fact that it's so integrative to our entire being,
Yeah.
it's just a powerful thing. And I think that sharing that with my kids, that maybe they don't get to feel that. Maybe they've never felt that
Yeah.
before. They are a little disconnected from their bodies. We do have some kinesthetic issues. Granted, with my students, gross motor skills are often an area of strength,
Yeah.
respectively.
Yeah.
Um, but because they just naturally love to move. Children love to move, and I want to help them learn how to do it in a way that's safe and effective and fun. And Eric, I was thinking when I watched one of your other interviews, you were talking and sharing about your younger athletes. My youngest athletes are 5.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm doing some pretty intense athletic training with 5-year-olds,
Yeah.
and I modify and I adapt as needed. But I love that they're 5 and they're doing real things, like,
Well, and I want to talk about that. I was literally thinking about this while I was in training earlier in my gym. One of the things, and I'd love to get into this with you about adapted PE. I think from my perspective as a professional, my ideal scenario. There are different developmental stages, obviously. Important marks around the 3 to 5 year age, and then again at 8 or 9, and then definitely around 12 and 13, where we see movement get really good, or we see movement fall off
right.
a lot, and then we try to recapture some of that movement depending on how an athlete is growing and so forth. But what I come back to here as I think about my ideal foundation for adapted PE, if we have in some way, shape, or form all of our students starting out at that 5 or 6 or 7 year age, regardless of their diagnosis or their level of capability, squatting, pushing,
Hmm.
pulling, carrying within appropriate scope for
Right.
their age and developmental level. Think about that as a basis for everything else that they're going to do, whether they play sports or
Yep.
not, whether they go into dance or martial arts or
Absolutely.
kayaking or whatever it is. If we give them that foundation, and I think about
Yes.
it from my perspective, selfishly as a professional, also, you're working with younger ones. In my own
Hmm.
practice, I'm working 12 to 70 years old, literally.
Right.
My youngest is 12, my oldest is 70.
Wow.
So when I get, let's say the average age of one of my one-to-one athletes is somewhere in the 20s, somewhere 30s, and typically they've never had any type of fitness programming. And they're,
Right,
when I get stories about their adapted PE, it's kind of they kind of did for a little while and then they didn't. Okay. But what
right.
if they all had this foundation? What if that was something that
Exactly.
were mandatory? It's set. So now I get them at 21. It's like, okay, they already have a relatively good squat pattern. They already
Yes.
know how to set and root their feet when they're pressing or pulling. Okay, good. We have a good starting point. So I'd love your take on that also, because I think about it that like set the foundation first.
Yes, and you know what, Eric? I could not agree more. And the most beautiful thing is that since I first became certified in 2020,
Yeah.
we're now at 2025, right? So some of my students that I had that year that I started, they were relatively early on. I had kindergartners, and so now these kindergartners are making their way to middle school.
Mhm.
Um, and let me tell you, I just notice such a difference in the kiddos that have had it
Mhm.
from day one, because these are, typically PE programs, they might focus on, and, I know you talked about this in other interviews, they might focus on sports skills or fundamental movement skills. But what we're teaching in autism fitness is fundamental to the fundamental movement skills.
Yeah. It's
So
pre-fundamental.
it's pretty fundamental, but it's so important for lifetime skills. These are things that we're going to have to do for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
And um, so I love seeing some of my middle schoolers now where we have been training for years. And it's like, I'll be honest, when I first started training with them, I was not new to adapted PE, but new to the systematic way that we do training in autism fitness.
Yeah.
And just building on those exercises week after week, my kids are familiar. They
Mm.
know what to expect. And the best part is that when I have started with them at age 5, they're so comfortable. And it's just like it's part of their life. It's
Yeah.
part of how they move their body, that they have now developed the ability to really make choices,
Mm.
to really tell me what they like, what they don't like, how many reps they feel comfortable doing, how many, I'm tired today. Can we just do 10? Sure, no
Yeah.
problem. But we get to the point in middle school where I know my athletes very well, and I know, because I'm assessing them with the pack profile every year
Mhm.
and looking at those gains in their present level of performance, I'm putting it in the IEP. Um, and so I'm seeing those gains. And when they're able to tell me how they want to participate, right? Like that is lifetime fitness.
Yeah. Yeah.
That, like you said, you love to train in your garage gym. You love to do your jujitsu. Like I love to do yoga, but that's because it is literally part of my everyday life. I love it. My kids now, I find that they request independently. I want PE. I want Miss Colleen.
Yeah.
If they're going to elope, they usually elope to my room and go sit down
Like you're
getting
not
ready for
supposed to be here
instruction.
right now.
Yeah. But the thing is, I'm like, you know what? I'll ask your teacher. Can I keep you? I'll keep you, because
Yeah.
they love it. And I love that it has become a part of their daily life and a
Yeah.
part of their programming.
Yeah. Oh man, I wish I could bottle that.
Yeah.
Everything
And
that you just said, because it speaks to something. When I did the interview with Chrissy, also we were talking about I don't even know if it's deprioritization of fitness, but not holding it up on that pedestal,
yeah,
the way other therapeutic interventions or therapies or aspect of education are, particularly for the neurodivergent population. But what you just described there is so critical when we talk about some of the things that are most pertinent and also
mhm,
most challenging for our population: self-advocacy,
yes,
choice,
right.
being able to sequence things, being able to
Yes.
not only speak on their own behalf, but talk about higher level and sometimes more abstract things. all of these are part of the whole fitness realm. Sometimes I refer to it as the NASA model of things because, well, why are we putting a rocket into space? Because that gives us microwave ovens.
Right.
Also, we may not know that going in, but if we think of fitness again as this hub on which we can develop these
Yes.
other skills, then I think it becomes more apparent, at least from my perspective, which is albeit an extremely biased one,
Yes.
why
Mine
this is
too.
so inherently important.
But you know what, Eric? I mean, before I returned back to the Center for Autism, I worked at an applied behavior analysis school,
Yeah,
which is why Autism Fitness is such an amazing fit for me because I take a behavioral approach
yeah,
to everything I do.
mm,
Um, and so I just think it's when we're looking at evidence-based practice for
yeah,
autism, exercise is an evidence-based practice, and it is
yeah,
one because it's known to increase on-task behavior,
yeah,
increase connection, increase body awareness, decrease interfering behavior. Like these are all things that the data shows us that exercise does, and it's for everybody, but it has been categorized as an evidence-based practice for autism. So I feel like we have the science, we have the data showing how important and how much other areas can improve. And it's only shown by the kids because they love it.
mhm,
And so, it makes them feel better and perform better in every area. So, I think we just have to keep plugging along, and I feel like the kids show how important it is.
yeah. And there are moments also, and I think you illuminated some of these earlier, and I'm thinking back to some of my athletes also that like I got this moment. When we talk about some of these more abstract concepts like confidence and self-advocacy,
Mhm.
we can certainly operationally define them to an extent, but
Yes.
if we have a student, for example, who is pre-verbal or they have an augmented communication system or
Mhm.
they are selectively nonverbal or they are nonverbal
Yes.
and have difficulty communicating their needs, when we say confidence or we give a word, it's very difficult to tease apart what we're actually talking about with respect to that individual. But I think it's a failure to just say, oh, they don't have the capability to develop any type of confidence or self-actualization there. But a
Right.
moment, what I love about using exercise as a way to do that is you get these moments where the athlete, as you described, is clearly advocating for themselves. So there is
Mhm.
definitely that sense of self. And then in terms of confidence, when you have an athlete who is walking into your PE session and
Mhm.
is initiating the exercises and is requesting things, I think it's difficult, not impossible, but difficult to say that there's not an element of what we would consider objective confidence occurring there because
Absolutely.
they feel enough control of the situation that they can begin whatever it is, whatever exercise of
Yes.
their own volition.
Absolutely. They know where they're supposed to be, what they're supposed to be doing, and they know I usually give visual choices for everything that we do. And they know their choices. And believe me, I'm a teacher, so I very carefully engineer the choices, but
Well, it's selection within reason.
yes, of course. And but I want my athletes to be comfortable because I mean, I don't if I go to the gym and I'm like, I really need like kind of a low impact recovery day,
Yeah.
I would be I would just want to leave if
Mhm.
somebody said, "Okay, we're going high impact today." I
Yeah.
would just be like, "Oh, that's not what I need."
Right.
So your body knows what it needs, and my athletes know what they need, and I'm there to help them, encourage them to grow and push themselves, and challenge themselves, of
Yeah.
course. But I always want it to be as positive of an experience as
Yeah.
possible. And in fact, like some of my students, just like you said, with different communication systems. I actually have a student right now that, you know, um, is not so responsive. So I know we've got to pair, right? I've got to pair myself with reinforcement. I've got to pair PE with reinforcement. I've got to pair movement with reinforcement.
Yeah.
So right now, even just the simple request of, would you like to take a turn is very anxiety provoking for him. So what I'm going to do now is maybe create a visual like red light or green light, red or green. I'm
Yeah.
going to come over to, I'm just thinking this out right now, actually, but,
Great. Yeah.
but
We'll do a follow-up interview to find out how it went.
yeah, just, saying if you're ready for a turn. I know that the effort of the communication is a lot for him right now because he's still developing his system. He's still developing that confidence. So it's my job to make it so that he
Yeah.
can be successful. No matter what I have to do, I've got to give him those tools. So
Yeah.
I'll come up with any tool that I can to make my students have a way to participate and be successful at all costs.
Yeah. Well, because you're setting up the framework and the environment too. When I've gotten these emails, I don't know if you've ever had any of these parent communications, but sometimes the first communication that I get in an email form is, "Hey, my kid hates to exercise."
Yes, I
And
get
my
that one
first
a
thought
lot.
is, no, they don't. Someone tried something, it didn't work, it didn't
Right.
go as planned, and now there's this very hard line
Yeah.
interpretation of what
Yes.
happened, but that's not necessarily the case. So my response to that is usually, okay, what'd you try? Like before, they
Exactly.
don't get the really good information, but so much of this the exercise, everything is important, and that's why we have the physical, the adaptive, and the cognitive. So the exercise selection is important, but even before that, setting up the environment, developing a
Hmm.
trusting rapport with the athlete, giving
Absolutely.
them as much agency and advocacy as is appropriate in that situation is going to give you a much more streamlined path to a partnership with that athlete. Because if they just came in and said, you have opposite extremes. If they come into the room and you say, do this, like, well, now someone is making me do something.
Yeah.
And that's never really this is what you just said regarding, going into the gym and needing a lower impact day. And on the other side, the other extreme is, hey, what do you want to do today? And you're like, has anybody ever asked you that? Like, what do you want to do? And you're like, I don't
There's a million
yeah,
answers. How do I pick
yeah.
one?
I don't know. What type of exercise do you want to do today? I don't
Yes.
know. This is my first or second or third class. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
So creating it's agreeable structure. Right.
Yes. Absolutely. And that is a great point because I have certain kids that there's particular exercises that they just, for whatever
Yeah.
reason, they just don't like. And I'm like, you know what? That's fine.
Yeah.
Let's just have another choice. And they are usually more than willing. They're actually honored that I gave them a choice because I
Yeah.
think a lot of times in their academic history, that hasn't happened. And so I know with our students, with all of my athletes, tolerating demands
Yep.
has been a it could have been, not always, but it could have been a lifetime struggle.
Sure.
Not in all cases, but so we do see a lot of escape maintained behavior. And all I can do is just build that motivation. And I know I see your videos where you're like, okay, we're going to do Pokemon squats or whatever it is, building in the motivation and connecting with the students in that way is really important to me knowing how I can coach and cue because I want them to be open to receiving what I'm giving them throughout.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that again, it's a partnership because if we start from the perspective of respecting the athlete and that, but also the roles are important also. This is my athlete, I'm still the coach. So
Yes.
it's not, I'm just going to follow whatever you do and that's okay. That's okay because that breaks down the structure and now there
Right.
are no guardrails for it. And
Yes.
that doesn't work for anybody. And I've actually found, and I think the research supports this also, if you don't have boundaries there, then you're going to have a much more anxious individual because
Absolutely.
now, okay, well, what do we do here? How does it go? What are the contingencies in place?
Yes.
But on the other side, if you take this authoritarian approach of do this and then do this, and that is going to effectively kill off the athletes' not only short-term enjoyment, but as you mentioned earlier, their pairing of the situation and the
Yeah,
exercises and the coach with reinforcement so that we have long-term development and we have and we're developing, fitness as a lifestyle also.
absolutely.
So I will, when we talk about meeting, because I see this all over social media now, the new thing is, I don't know if it's a new thing, but meeting the individual where they're at. Great,
Mhm.
but what does that actually mean? So
Right.
your point about Pokemon squats,
Hmm.
whatever you want to call it,
Yes.
Pokemon squat, as long as we're squatting. So that's the caveat there
Right.
is as long as the thing that we need to do is getting done, because that's what my job is,
Yes.
then I will absolutely invite and entertain the way in which you want to do it. I'll count it. I've counted in languages that I don't even speak. Right?
That's
Because
good.
it's supporting the athlete. I've had
Yes.
requests. I have an athlete who I count. Oh, I hope his mom watches this too. I count alternating in English and Spanish. So
Oh,
it's
that's
one and
fabulous.
then dos, and then so my brain is smoked by the time we're done with this. Because if I respect the fact that this works for him
Absolutely.
and he maintains focus, then we're going to get the physical outcome that we want, but it should never come at the expense of the athlete's experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I have students like that too. I have one little student that is a huge Star Wars fan. He didn't, he preferred to sit. So I had to bring in that reinforcement. So it was, hey, I've got this very cool lightsaber that you can turn on and you can hold whenever you're not holding equipment. We just got to be up and in the instructional area.
Yeah.
That's it. And it's yours. And he got up and he's moving and grooving now, and eventually you can, we obviously want to give intermittent reinforcement, and it's we obviously want to fade when we can, and we do, but getting that motivation and knowing that I'm open to making it work for students. They know that about me. They trust that when they come to me, I'm going to check with them. I mean, when I greet them, that's the first thing I do. We say hello. I go down the line. I say hello to every one of my students, ask them how they are with however they communicate, whether it's thumbs up, thumbs down, or their augmentative communication system, their textbook, whatever communication system they have, we check in, because if somebody's really having a crummy day, I just know that we might need to approach things a little bit softer, a little bit gentler,
Yeah.
and that's okay, you know?
Yeah. It's interesting. I think about that too. And you're very experienced, very practiced, and you understand these things from not only the fundamental level, but you're considering it from all these three different areas of performance. They're sometimes referred to as like soft skills, like being able to, prosody and tone are two big ones. Like, can you meet the athlete at the proper tone? Body positioning, all of these things, which are sometimes referred to as soft skills, but they're really some of the most important. And there is a science to it also. Like
Yeah.
sometimes allowing an athlete to down-regulate, especially one who is having a difficult day, where you have the patience and the resolve as a
Yeah.
practitioner to give them the extra 2 or 3 seconds, even when it feels uncomfortable,
Hmm.
to enable
Yes.
them to make that choice. And I know you've had situations like this also.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, because I do love to give them choice, and I do realize that choice is a demand, right?
Yeah.
So if communication is difficult and you are having a tough time communicating that day, then that choice might be difficult.
Mhm.
So I'm prepared immediately to turn on a dime at all times, right? I've got my visuals digitally
Mhm.
projected. I also have a printout of my visuals. I also have the actual objects on a cart. So
Wow.
if,
That is a three-dimensional approach right there.
yes, absolutely. Because if my athlete is, I would prefer for them to kind of take, um, take the opportunity to walk up to the board and take that leadership opportunity to pick something, and then all the students will do it if they want to. I give them choices. But if that makes them anxious that day, I'm going to give it right to them or to their communication system. I want them to have every tool. I will never have my athletes not do something because I didn't provide them what they needed. I
Right.
want to give them every opportunity to tell me, show me, let me know how they're available to show up
Yeah.
today. And
Yeah.
it's important.
It is important, and it's understanding the gradient scale and when something has reached almost a tipping point. Like the thing I think of is you can have a student who is a great singer or great at drawing, and then
Yes.
someone makes the mistake of saying, "Oh, that's amazing. Go do it in front of the rest of the class." And it's
And then
like,
they're like,
"No, that's not the way I operate."
yeah.
And to understand that, to bring it back to the fitness thing, I've had that happen with sports. So I've had some athletes who, in addition to our training, they like shooting hoops. They like shooting baskets. They don't want to play basketball. They just
Right.
want to do this one thing.
Yes.
So sometimes there's the extrapolation of that particular observation, like, oh, they love shooting hoops, they'll love playing basketball. No, they just want to do this one compartmentalized thing.
Absolutely. And that oftentimes with my athletes, when it does come to sports, that typically is they usually want to engage in whatever the kind of cause and effect part
Yeah.
of the sport, whether it's kicking the ball right into the goal or, but all of the rules and everything, it can get a little convoluted, and
Yeah.
then what happens is we're just not moving as much. So
Yeah.
you
Absolutely.
know,
Well, the chaos of gameplay tends to render many, I'll stop short of saying most, but many of our neurodivergent individuals in flee or freeze. And they just
yes,
want to freeze, and then they're watching, and then they become spectators. And it
yes,
comes back to this thing, and I've had this conversation with like nearly every pro, is the difference between, oh, we're playing soccer and what is actually happening
right,
right now.
exactly,
Like there are nets and there are soccer balls, but what is actually, and that's why,
right.
to your point about, the following the data and the science, it's not just this dry numerical thing. It's the answer to what is actually happening, how is it happening, and what can we do to enhance it as well. Like what are all observable things telling us about what is going on right
Yes. Yes, and when I'm doing the pack profile, right, I can look at every specific movement. I'm noting how many times the athlete did it. I'm noting, whether they have met the baseline for criteria mastery.
now.
I'm noting everything. I'm noting the amount of weight. I'm noting the amount of reps. I'm noting how long before they got fatigued. And so and I'm also noting, how did I have to coach? How did I have to cue? How many breaks did they need? And
Yeah.
then I report all of that, because that is a real picture of how that student can participate in fitness programming. Now, when I first get my athletes, they're probably going to need a little break on a trampoline or swing between just about every activity,
Yeah.
because that's just where they are. And I'm in the room that has those things, so it's hard to deny access to them
Yeah, where when it's there,
constantly.
it's like, oh, that's one of my least favorite. I learned not to do that early on. It's like, oh, we can't use that, or that's
Yeah.
not for
So,
using. It's like, yeah, okay, try convincing someone of that.
but I scale back the breaks and the reinforcement as
Yeah,
the athletes get more confident, and they know when we're in a group session, they know the expectations. And then at the end, I do have a little set of rules that we follow, and we all go down the line and check our rules
yeah,
off. And then they have kind of like a big reinforcer at the end that they're allowed to choose. And that's usually I love it when they choose a gross motor choice like jumping or using
Yeah.
the scooter board or using the swing. And a lot of my students do. My little students might want a sticker or something like that, or, but they're excited because they know, hey, this is going to be really fun. And then she's going to tell me I did an awesome job. And then I'm going to
Yeah.
get something really cool. Like it's
I
just
of
reinforcement on
that
top of reinforcement.
of that sequence though, the first thing that you said is so important because I think what happens oftentimes is, you're always bringing in like the when I say bringing in the energy from an operational
Yes.
definition standpoint, the way that you carry yourself, the way that you communicate with the students or athletes, all of these things actually show up and create that interface also. So it does
Yes.
matter. And when the exercise itself is treated as something that we need to just get through. It's like, oh, you have to do this stuff, or we're going to do this stuff first. But don't worry, after the exercise, you get to do,
Yeah.
you are completely discounting the fact that number one, maybe it's possible that the athlete is actually going to enjoy the exercise if, again, we build the right things around it.
Yes.
And two, that if we are providing a negative connotation around the exercise, what does that say in both the short and long term about the way that they are going to approach the overhead press or the squat or the heavy carry, whatever it is? But on the other side, if we show up as this is awesome, and then you also get to do something that is awesome that is not this,
Yes.
these communications matter.
Absolutely. And for my athletes, especially my middle schoolers, as they get towards seventh and eighth grade, they get so competent with the skills that I can start having them train with each other more. And when with my little guys, just with coaching and cueing, and with our tiny friends releasing a medicine ball, they just
Yes.
want to hold
Yeah.
it and squeeze it,
Right. Yeah.
So they need a lot more partial physical assistance
Sure.
than my older guys do. But once my older athletes just really get confident and competent in their exercises, I love it when they're saying, "Hey, I want to do push throws and scoop throws, and I want to do them with this 5-pound sandball. I love the
Yeah.
red one, and I want to do them with my buddy over here." I'm like,
Wow.
"Yes, absolutely."
Well,
It's
yeah.
so reinforcing to me to see them take ownership of it and to know that this is their time, this is their body. They get to be strong and they get to feel how great it feels to move. And I just love when my athletes take ownership of it. And it starts, some of my late elementary kiddos start with that, but it really, really, they come into their own in middle school. And I'm glad that I get to keep them until eighth grade. So I get to see that transition
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah. What was I'd love to finish out because we could go for another hour and a half easy. What I want to finish up on here is have you ever had a surprise with a particular student in as much as, oh, I didn't think they were going to be able to do this at this point, or oh, I didn't think that this was happening just yet in terms of their
Yes,
capability.
I actually have. I had a student this year recently, and I've had her for 2 years now. And I got her as a kindergartner, and she was one of those students who she was always happy to participate
Mm.
and happy to be there, but just needed a lot of assistance and didn't initiate doing things without pretty much full physical prompting because
Yeah.
she just didn't have the confidence about knowing exactly what was happening. So after, when I get a young student, I like to give them time before I say, okay, I want to give them direct instruction because they've got a lot of growing to do. But it got to a point where I was like, I see so much potential in this athlete. I really want to do some direct instruction with her. And I'm telling you, I started doing direct instruction with her. And so I was able to really just say, okay, we're going to just work on one skill today. And that's just where she was. And like we talked about before, meeting her where she is for that time, just the level of demand, we just needed to work on one thing. And I'm going to tell you, she has now independently, she is currently doing her her sandbell slams with a 5 pound sandbell. And I mean,
Yeah.
that's a complex movement.
Yeah.
When I think that a year ago, if I would say, let's do sandbell slams, and I would start to give her a prompt to just the first part, which is picking it up, I would have to go ahead and start with physical assistance there. And now she is slamming independently, and I am blown away because she just needed a little bit. She just needed that one-to-one with
Yeah.
no distraction connection. And some kids just do. And I was able to really, really like specify on the coaching and cueing with her.
Yeah.
And that was what she needed. She just needed time that when you're in a group setting, it was hard not to move her along because
Mm.
5 people were waiting. You
Right.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. The group dynamics being this thing, but sometimes
Yeah.
in a group situation, it takes a little bit longer. And then you're like, oh, yeah, I could. Oh, she does have it. And it was,
But now she's generalizing it in the
yep.
group setting and she's showing her friends what she can do. And that to me is like so powerful because something that 2 months ago she could not do without full assistance,
Yeah.
she's now doing independently in a group setting with no assistance, with just the verbal directive of, okay, time for sandball slams. And she knows what to do. So it's just those moments where you're like, okay, yeah, because first sandball slams, next is our hurdle steps, next is our, and for that student, I started with sandball slams because it was very concrete and I knew that that was going to be something that she was going to be able to pick up in a pretty easy way, and she did because the kids love the sandbells. It's so funny. You don't think that you're bringing out like mesmerizing toys for 5-year-olds,
Yeah.
but you are. They love the sandbells. They love the battle ropes. They love all of the equipment. They want to explore it. And it's wonderful. But just seeing a kid get something, just seeing an athlete really click in with a moment where they're doing something completely independently, um, it's just wonderful because I know if they learned that skill, guess what? We can build on that.
Oh,
So,
that stuff. Yeah. Oh, and all I want, like my entire mission for the past 20 something years has been to have that. Oh, the dogs waited until last. Has been to have that as the PE, dare I say, adapted PE. But that is the quintessential ideal
yes.
PE experience. Like if we could give every student, imagine again, coming back to my ideal, if we could give every student that, those opportunities and those skills to generalize into their life right now and in the future, you change, and this is what you've been doing already, you change lives,
Yeah.
period.
You change lives and you change families because their children are athletes that have skills that they can use every day. Their body is their only home and they're going to need it for the rest of their life. So, learning how to live in it and have it work for you and be healthy for you and you can help your family. It's the most powerful thing we can do because if we can't live in our bodies and be healthy, what else can we do, right? So, I'm so passionate about helping my athletes feel at home and feel happy in their bodies. And, they can do so much with their bodies. And I just want them to be able to do the absolute most and have fun.
Colleen, this was, when I say awesome, in the truest sense of the word. So thank you. And on behalf of, your students and their families and every educator you've come in contact with, every administrator, thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for
So,
having me. And thank you for
yeah.
Autism Fitness. It has definitely changed my life as a professional, and it has changed a lot of my athletes' lives. So thank you because we are rocking it out every day.
And of course, if you're inspired by Colleen, which how could you not, if you're not inspired by Colleen here, check with your cardiologist, please, because I'm not sure it's working. If you're ready to become an Autism Fitness Certified Pro, head on over to autismfitness.com. We have courses throughout the year in just about every time zone. And you can start your coursework immediately and then serve the individuals that you work with every day to promote much more effective movement, much more uh, higher quality of lives in the short and long term. And that is the movement for movement. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, all the YouTube stuff. I'm Eric Chessen, founder of Autism Fitness. Colleen, thank you again, and
Thank
see
you.
you next time with another pro interview.